Hi, I'm Michael Brooks, and I'm a producer at The Majority Report with Sam Cedar, and I'm doing this segment for the David Pakman channel. And joining me today is Zerlina Maxwell. She's a contributor to Feministing.com and Ebony magazine. How you doing, Zerlina?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's really beautiful outside. We were just
Yes,
talking about.
really nice.
So I'm going to start off. I think the kind of big thing, obviously, that's sort of on everybody's mind is how the Supreme Court will rule
Right.
on health care. I don't want to make a fool of either of us by asking you to predict on the ruling, but I'm curious, depending on which way it goes, just in terms of the election, there's an argument that if the election goes against, the ruling goes against healthcare, it might actually fire up Obama's base.
Right.
Then there's, the other view that if it's struck down, it will really dishearten people and kind of hurt the cause of progressive governance in general. What do you
Right.
think?
I mean, I think I would hope that it's not struck down. I mean, I think as a progressive, you don't want any, especially the biggest piece of legislation he has passed, to be ruled unconstitutional because a lot of Americans, I mean, they already think the health care bill is unconstitutional because they don't really have, legal minds or understand what the word unconstitutional means. They just hear it in the media, repeated in the media by people that have an agenda. And so the headline, Obamacare ruled unconstitutional, is not in any way, shape, or form a net positive for Obama's reelection chances. I think that it's better that this is happening in June than in October, because people may or may not go into the polling place and actually have this on their minds. But at the same time, I am not of the viewpoint that it will fire up the base. I think the base pretty much is under the full impression that it's a must-win election. I don't think that the real true base voters are going to stay home either way. I think that they're going to turn out regardless. I can't see a scenario where it being ruled unconstitutional is a positive.
Right. Following up on that, I think that the court, and I don't think that any of it should be struck down, sort of speaking for myself, but I think the strongest grounds and where it's also most unpopular with the public is the individual mandate.
Right.
That's a Republican idea, and now
Right.
it's going to brand Obama's healthcare plan. Do you think there's a way of disentangling that and actually reminding people and letting people know that that's Republican policy?
Right. Well, I always said this, right? I think that, I've said in so many interviews, when conservatives are attacking the individual mandate, that it was a Republican idea with the Heritage Foundation in the 1990s. It's their idea. So the idea, I've even, I'm in law school, so I've been at Federalist Society discussions about the healthcare bill and the individual mandate, and I've just called them out, like, you guys need to Google the Heritage Foundation, the individual mandate, and Orrin Hatch, and then you'd be shocked that what you're arguing against is actually your idea. And so, and it's they know it's ridiculous, and also that the individual mandate is completely constitutional based on the law. So this is really a political argument, and the fact that it made it all the way up to the very conservative court is really just a testament to the partisan environment that we're in. And I also think that, it's a difficult argument to make. I mean, trying to explain the Commerce Clause to someone on the street is pretty difficult. And so conservatives have just benefited from the fact that, it's a really, really difficult argument to make. When you break down the healthcare bill by its parts, the other parts of the healthcare bill, and the individual pieces, people really like that. If you take the name away, they've done polling where if you take the name and you don't call it Obamacare, you just say, oh, well, health insurance companies can't deny people with pre-existing conditions, then people really think that's a great idea. My kid can stay on my in health insurance until they're 26. Great idea. People support that. When you label it Obamacare, people all of a sudden have a political response. So,
Yeah, that's always been a problem for progressive policies, that the individual
right,
pieces always pull better than the sort of pull packages when it gets more abstracted as, big government or whatever. I want to move on to something that will definitely affect the president's reelection, and something that theoretically we should all agree with, although it doesn't seem like all of us do. And that's the voter suppression going on in the states. I'm forgetting his name right now, but a pretty prominent state Republican leader in Pennsylvania actually said that on record that suppressing votes or the new voter ID laws will help Romney. I think the statistic is something like somebody committing voter fraud is like 30 times less likely than getting struck by lightning.
Right.
And, Nancy Pelosi said that the reason Republicans are targeting Holder so much right now is because he's fighting these state initiatives. Do you think that that's true?
Yes, I think that it's absolutely true. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to talk about. I think Holder's contempt vote has a lot to do with the fact that he's taking really aggressive stance against voter suppression. And also I feel that, as the first Black Attorney General, he's, who they can attack. He's Obama by proxy. Mm-hmm. And so they can't go after the president, but they're going to go after Holder. And the fact that they keep calling Fast and Furious the new Watergate is just another way to sort of beat the drum towards impeachment, which I've just always felt that they were going to try to do, even if they had to manufacture a scandal out of nothing, which is what they've done here. With voter suppression, I mean, I think that the only hope that I have is that there is an army of lawyers that are going to be working on the Obama side to make sure that people's votes are counted, but that doesn't really help with making sure that they're actually able to cast them.
Right.
And so I think that there's a two-prong problem here. One, making sure that people are actually able to vote, and then the second part is those votes are actually counted. And really, the Obama campaign is responsible for the latter. The former is the Justice Department, and that's why Eric Holder is really in a target of so many partisan attacks.
Right, that makes perfect sense. I want to get to a follow-up question on voter suppression in a second, but I was struck by the first thing that you kind of said in that answer, which is that you think that Republicans are definitely gearing up towards impeachment. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, in 2010, when we were looking at all the polling, and it looked really likely that Republicans were going to take back the House, Daryl Issa alluded to pretty much start, looking into everything. And he used the I word really, really early on, even when it was before Fast and Furious even, took off. But, I think that this was something that they were looking to do. I just think that they were going to try their darndest to make a scandal out of anything. It could have been something really, really small.
Well, they tried with Solyndra.
Right, exactly. And actually, Jon Stewart had a really good bit last night about Fast and Furious, where he broke down all the different scandals, so-called scandals in the Obama administration that they've called worse than Watergate. And he was like, so Obama's had 4 Watergates, but Richard Nixon only had 1. And because everything to them is worse than Watergate. And, even John Dean, he tweeted last night, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to comparing things to Watergate. Not only that, but Fast and Furious, most of the facts that we know about the case that are reported by the mainstream media are not correct. There was a report today on CNN that said that the background of the story, the fact that gets often repeated, the fact that we intentionally sold guns to known criminals, that actually was not true. And so, it's very interesting what gets made a permanent part of the narrative when it's actually factually incorrect.
Right. Right. And also the notion that, the way to the conspiracy for gun control in the United States rests on how closely people follow what's going on in Mexico. I mean, it's just kind of hilarious. But getting back to voter suppression. So this is something that I'm curious about. Obviously, there's fundamental rights issues here, but from a political point of view, I think it's difficult because it's really clear, I think empirically, that obviously Republicans are pushing this to suppress and lower the vote count among certain constituencies that vote Democratic. That's obvious. Voter fraud isn't any type of epidemic or any type of serious national issue. Now, that said, I think that if you're a kind of lower information voter or whatever term you want to use, and you just see, okay, Republicans say this is a big deal, Democrats say that's just trying to hurt our constituencies. Oh, well, that's another issue where, they're all arguing and it's all
Right.
corrupt and blah, 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 blah. And what gets obscured is fundamentally this is about, this is almost like postmodern Jim Crow or something. Like, this is
Right.
about people voting.
Right.
How do we frame that issue so it doesn't just get kicked into that field of kind of dull partisan politics and people are reminded of the real fundamental stakes here?
Well, I mean, framing it as the new Jim Crow, I think, is helpful. Although it is, it is very strong language. Although I
Mm-hmm.
agree with it, and that was something that I've seen elected officials call it the new Jim Crow. But also too, I think the main thing is that saying that Democrats want more people to vote, Republicans want fewer people to vote, and that if you make the frame very simple one, I think that that is important. The main thing is that you have to just, whenever people hear the term voter fraud or suppression, or it just scares them into thinking that voting is going to be some sort of hassle and that they're going to be, it's going to be really difficult when they go to the polls, and that they're going to have to bring like 15 forms of ID, and they're going to be, interrogated before they're able to cast their vote. Because you want voting to be as simple as possible for people, especially busy people who have more than one job or kids, or, it needs to be a very, easy process. The more difficult you make it sound to the average person, the less likely they are to go and cast their vote. And just framing it as the Democrats want more people to vote. I mean, that's really
And
the
they
main
want it to be
issue.
easier to vote, I think, is the other
Exactly.
crucial thing you're saying.
They want more people to vote, and they want to make it as easy as possible for you to cast your vote because it's your fundamental right to do so. And so I think that if Democrats were able to, even if I think that it's important to point out that the Republican motivation, but that makes it partisan again. If you just say we want more people to vote and we want to make it as easy as possible for you to vote, and here are the things that you need to make sure that you do in order to go vote: get this type of ID, go make sure you know your polling place. If you make it as it's a patriotic duty and it's your job as an American to go make sure that you vote. So many people have lost their lives or been beaten in the streets to be able to make sure that you have this right, and Democrats want you to exercise it. I think that that's positive framing. You just leave the Republicans out of it.
Yeah, I like how even as I was leading up to that question, which I think is a really smart way to frame it, I used like the most inflammatory language possible. But I agree. I think fundamentally voting should not be like going to the dentist's office. It should be smooth, clear, easy, because it's a fundamental right.
Right.
I'm going to leave on a last question. This is just sort of fun. Maybe, I'll tell you my prediction too, so maybe we'll both embarrass ourselves. At this point, so far out, but what do you think in terms of who will win in November? And even if you want to make that prediction, what type of spread do you think it might be?
Well, I think that, when you look at the campaigns, different roads to get the number of electoral votes, because I'm one of the people that thinks that national tracking polls are ridiculous and unnecessary and not helpful. And so national tracking polls are stupid. I don't pay attention to them. But statewide polls, I pay attention to them. And then when you add up the electoral votes, when you start with the John Kerry map, and then you extrapolate out based on the polling in the battleground states, I think that Obama has a lot of different ways that he can get to 270, and Romney has fewer ways to get to 270, and he actually has more must-win states than Obama does, and so I think that I can't say that I'm extremely confident at this moment, because there's still really a lot of time between now and November, and a lot could really happen. I think the election is going to be close. But then you always have to keep in mind that Obama only won 53% of the vote in 2008. And so it wasn't like it was a big electoral college victory, but really popular vote was very close.
Right.
And I think that, it's going to be a close election again. I think that Obama is going to win, though. Mitt Romney is not a strong candidate. I think Obama got lucky in many ways with Romney being the nominee, with all of his problems with Bain, which is, even though Democrats don't like that line of attack, it's very effective, particularly in the Midwest and in states like very important states like Ohio. I think that his newly, he's challenging the Washington Post story about offshoring and outsourcing, where he calls it offshoring, but it's really outsourcing. And
Offshoring's his
that
taxes. No, I'm sorry.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Offshoring his taxes.
Yeah.
But I think, he has offshore bank account. I mean, he hasn't released his tax returns. There's so much with Romney that, as we get closer to the election in November, I mean, I can't wait for the debates. I cannot wait for President Obama to call him out on so many of these different issues, because Romney really has a lot of, weaknesses. And so that's part of the reason why I feel that Obama will win, because there's just really so much ammunition that you can use against Romney, and he really doesn't have any answers for them. And that's really the problem with him, is that he can't state a position on anything. He equivocates, he dodges and ducks, and that doesn't instill confidence in voters.
Absolutely. And I think that, the Bain stuff is very effective amongst people
Right.
who actually vote and will matter
Right.
in this election. And I think Obama will win too. I'll put my name on it as well.
Yeah.
Zerlina, thanks so much
Thank you.
for talking with me today.
Thank you.
Take care.